Got it. It's telling me that it's been a live stream. Well, everybody, welcome to Voices Randomish. I hope that you're well tonight. I'm your host, Eldridge Alexander, and we're sorry for being a little bit late tonight, but you know how technology is. Tonight, I'm here with a young lady. Her name is Kayla Nessman, and Kayla is the communication coordinator for Esther in the Fox Valley here, the Fox cities, which is comprised of Appleton, Nina Menasha, Oshkosh, and what am I missing? Appleton, obviously.
Yes.
All righty. So, Kayla, how are you doing today? I hope everything is good with you today.
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing okay today too. I really wanted to do this show for us tonight because I believe that this topic is
Mm-hmm.
something that really begs to be heard and discussed. For those of you who have just tuned in tonight, I'm your host, Eldridge Alexander. You're on Voices Randomish, and tonight we're going to be talking about women in chains. In a moment, I'm going to be sharing a video, a presentation, and we're going to walk through some facts here about women who are shackled in the prison system here in Wisconsin. So, Kayla, if you want to run through a few facts that you may have, I know you've been doing some research on this very topic. Why don't you get us started off and tell us what you've learned so far about what's happening with especially women who are in labor
Mm-hmm.
being shackled while incarcerated?
Yeah, definitely. So recently I've been doing some research on this topic. This was previously not something that I was aware of, but in a lot of states, incarcerated women who are pregnant are still being shackled, while they're pregnant, while they're giving labor, and during like the child delivery process. And it's a very dangerous practice for that
Mm-hmm.
to be done, um, largely because medical staff are very limited on the care that they can give these women. Like, for example, if there's like an emergency cesarean section that needs to get done, and if a woman is shackled, how is that supposed to be done? So, a woman might be in danger if, she's shackled and she can't get the medical attention that she could if she wasn't being shackled. Um, so one thing that I found was um, there was one woman in the Milwaukee area, and while she was in labor for 21 hours, and she was handcuffed and shackled during that entire time, which, I mean, giving birth and going through the labor process, that would, I can imagine that would already be a very uncomfortable experience. Um, but to go through that and have your movements be restricted by being handcuffed to the bed, I mean, that's a really, really hard experience. And so, yeah, for all of these states to still be um, really having all of these restrictions on it. And I guess, like, one of the things I found that why it's like why corrections facilities still want this practice to be done is because their rationale is that, oh, well, if a woman is not shackled, like while in, medical care, then there could be a danger to, corrections officers or medical staff, because their worry is that there's going to be violence or that the woman might try to make an escape attempt. But the majority of incarcerated women are nonviolent and have been nonviolent the entire time they've been incarcerated. And it would also be very, I guess, dangerous for a woman to try to, attempt escape, like while in labor or giving birth or receiving medical care, because there could be, complications, or, it'd also be very difficult to escape to, just since there's all that extra weight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I can understand like their argument from that point, but it's also, you know, it's again, like the majority of women aren't violent and it wouldn't be necessary to be shackled during medical care. Just because again, like medical staff, um, they also agree that, shackling is a dangerous practice.
Thank you for sharing that, Kayla. One of the things that I did too was while I knew we were going to do this show, I went and I started to I put in women being shackled and look at all the articles that actually came up. And the reason why this story was so touching for me and close to me is because I saw that right there in Milwaukee County, we're still practicing that. I want to play this video really quick. I don't think that there'll be any copyright issues or anything like that. This same woman here, she sued the jail for being put in shackles during labor. This is her talking about it. So for those of you who might want to go out there and look at it so we don't run into any copyright things or anything with the media or anything, go, if you type in women shackled while in labor, as you can see is exactly what we did, and you'll find numerous articles. What I want to do now is I want to shift here to a little bit of the information that was provided to me, and I'm going to go. I don't know if you can still see my desktop here with this PowerPoint. Can you see it, Kayla?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. So this is what I really wanted to go to is I really wanted to talk about this situation tonight. So I'm going to go here. So what happened? A little bit of research that I found is that in October 24th of 2017, the Senate Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety unanimously passed Senate Bill 393, which was authored by Lena Taylor. I happen to know Lena Taylor because I lived in Milwaukee for a while. Now, the beautiful thing about that is that that's a start, right? Well, some of you are probably saying, why is it important? What is Senate Bill 393? So the purpose of Voices Randomish and Kayla and I tonight is to educate you on, first of all, what's happening. You're shackling women in the state of Wisconsin, particularly in Milwaukee County jails when they're in labor. The Senate 393 bill that's introduced by Lena Taylor is a bill that will restrict the shackling of incarcerated women during labor and childbirth. So that's a start. Why do we need it? Because the legislation is apparently being introduced in response to reports of multiple incarcerated women being shackled while in labor in Milwaukee County, because that was the first article that I pulled up. And I did want to bring up the data that I'd found that federal facilities in 18 states have already have policies that prohibit or restrict shackling of pregnant women. So I wanted to bring that out because obviously it's an inhumanitarian thing to do. And someone who is a Jedi, and I talk about being a Jedi, I'm all things justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. I'm looking at this from a justice perspective. And where's the justice? Like you said before, if for some reason a woman was experiencing a breech birth and required a cesarean, then would cause or pose life-threatening situation for her. The Senate Bill 393, here's some of the benefits. It's supposed to ensure that incarcerated women would have access to, like you said, the needed maternal support services, including the supplies for pumping breast milk, postpartum health care, and testing for pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases. So let's talk a little bit about some of these health care needs that women have that are incarcerated and the benefits of having those things. What are some of the things that you've seen that, other than the shackling, what do you think is in the environment, Kayla, that you know from your research that is driving the need to feel like the guards feel like they have to shackle women? What do you think is driving that? Or in your research, what have you found?
Yeah, so something that I found was that these women are being shackled because prison systems were designed by men for men. So they didn't take into account women or their specific experiences. So these, when prisons were being designed by men, they only had male populations in mind, so that, like with women, they're just treating them like they would any other incarcerated population, because they're treating them equally, not equitably. So treating them equally in the sense that, oh, well, while you are pregnant, you are still an incarcerated person, so we're going to shackle you. instead of treating that person equitably and saying, oh, you are pregnant or you're going into labor, you're birthing a child, and we're not going to shackle you because you are going through a unique experience. And, even though that person is incarcerated, they do need to be treated equitably, and, not be shackled because, again, that's a different experience. And so, yeah, again, they're just being like treated equally. That's kind of, why they're being shackled instead of taking into account what specific needs or things that those women might need.
Yeah, I love that you did talk about the equitability, because a lot of people really are not necessarily aware of what the difference is between equality and equitable. Like you said, the
Mm-hmm.
equal thing is equal treatment. You're locked up, you're behind bars, you're incarcerated. But the equitable piece is that you treat each person based on their unique circumstances, is like what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying. In her unique circumstances, a woman that's in labor does not warrant that person being shackled. Because again, I'll go back to, what do you think is the danger or the perceived danger in the environment that they feel? Because I was talking to Jill and a few other people about this, Penny and some other people. I was like, my first question in my mind as a woman is that, okay, first of all, she's in labor, and I only have one child, right? So I've had the experience of labor, and I can tell you that I was not a threat to anybody. If you literally are in the corner in the fetal position yourself, if you can, waiting
Mm-hmm.
for that next labor pain to hit, right? And you don't know when it's going to
Yeah.
happen. So my question again, and maybe you learned about this, is what is the perception that the guards have of the danger that a woman in labor can impose on them while she's going through the labor
Mm-hmm.
process that necessitates being shackled?
To me, I think that it's a method of control. Um, because yeah, like a woman in labor, she does not pose a threat to, corrections officers, medical staff. Again, because most of the incarcerated women are nonviolent individuals.
Okay.
Um, and so, just from my perspective, shackling these women to me is just another form of control. Because what I learned in an expo meeting, a few weeks prior, ex-incarcerated people organizing meeting, was that, prisons were originally created in the United States to, you know, kind of control like Black and brown populations and,
Mm-hmm.
to keep people under control. And so it's always been about control. Like the foundation of prison systems has been built on control, and that's like where they keep continuing to grow on. So because we have this foundation, um, where they want to control people, um, I think that's, what we're kind of seeing, especially if, corrections officers, prison systems want to shackle pregnant women who, they don't pose a threat. But in their mind, they, maybe they do or don't pose a threat. But again, I think it's just like a big form of control for them.
Well, you spot on when you talk about it as being a form of control. People will often hear me talk about a couple of theorists, and one of them is Michel Foucault. And Michel Foucault is, like, to me, the king of talking about systems of and institutions of power. And you spot on when you talk about it, because the body is a politic. And what I mean by that is there's one side of the fence or another side of the fence that has its own ideology about what the body is supposed to be or not do in certain spaces, because you have structuration theory too, which is based on the type of structures that a person is in. Then there's a certain type of a power that's given to that institution over that body. And what you talked about, the shackling of, that's another way of control and power. And so here's the crazy thing about it, is everything that we have is an institution of power. It is. It's set up and it's designed, and you're so right about the prison systems being designed to get control black bodies. And what they were designed for specifically is to obtain free labor from black people after slavery was over, because what it was is that you had to pay us a fair wage unless we committed a crime. So if I spit on the sidewalk and you can lock me up for 30 years, i.e., the movie Life. If people have never seen the movie Life, life is the allegory and the metaphor for exactly what the prison systems are for. They lock you up, it's free labor. And believe it or not, there are several of them that are still happening right now in the state of Texas and in Louisiana. Those prison farms look the exact same way. So again, what you're talking about is an institution of power to control bodies, and it allows them to do certain things in a certain political manner inside that institution, because they say, well, that's the purpose of it. And the other piece about it is that in the prison systems, there's supposed to be places of rehabilitation, but in my studies that I've done on these max prisons, they're basically systems inside of systems that mimic what's already going outside in the macro system, which I mean is the big world. So you have these minor or micro systems of prisons, schools, churches, all of these different things that function as the politic to tell you how you can be in certain situations. And in those structures, they get to govern you and have control over your body. So that's why I say the body is a politic, because now you have people in certain places in government arguing about the institution in and of itself, the laws, the policies, the procedures. And now we're here to what can happen to female bodies when that female body is carrying another body inside that institution. Where's the guideline for drawing the boundary? I want to go back to a couple of other things that I found in this PowerPoint, and then we can resume our discussion, because I think you're spot on. And I love the fact that this is something that you're passionate about. I'm
Yeah.
going to share my screen. Again, I'm going to go back through a couple of things in here that I actually want everyone to be able to understand and see about the research that we're doing here. And if you just tuned in, if you like this broadcast, make sure you subscribe to the Voices Randomist channel, because we are the only channel that's out there that asks you, what's your frequency? We want to know what your frequency is about the things that happen in your community. All right, so, and getting back to sharing my screen here again, I'm here with Kayla Nessman. She's a communication coordinator for Esther, V.O.I.C.E.S. We're talking that she's part of the mental task force, and tonight we're talking about women, particularly in the Wisconsin prison systems, particularly down in Milwaukee County Jail, that are being shackled while in labor. So I want to bring back up the research that I was doing here and just share a few more facts with everybody. So we talked about the benefits of Senate Bill 393, and ensuring that these women have access to the maternal support, like we talked about pumping breast milk. What are some of the other services that you would like to see women have access to in the prison system that they may or may not have access to? Anything
Um,
you can think of?
I mean, I think postpartum care is, really important. Um, yeah, so yeah.
Oh, I agree with you on that, especially like with you being on the mental health, the mental task force. Tell me a little bit about some of the symptoms that people might, if you're aware of that they may experience after childbirth that necessitates the additional postpartum care. What are some things that might be going on with women?
I mean, just like mental health wise, women might experience I know it's pretty common for women to experience like depression or anxiety, or have like an increase in like mental health issues like right after giving birth. And so, having access to not only like medical care, but also having maybe like a counselor, like a therapist to talk to if, there's, for incarcerated women, just to help with like the mental health side effects as well as the physical.
Yeah, I would think that some of the reasons, and it almost feels like it's compounding, right? Because it feels like sometimes women have mental health issues that may have them end up incarcerated, but then once they're there, it's compounded because there are other issues on top of that that don't get addressed. So, for example, if a woman has just given birth to a child could there possibly be issues with separation anxiety and bonding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, because being with, that child after giving birth is, something that's really important. It's really, like a good bonding experience between the mother and the child. And if there is not that access there, if, the woman and the child are not able to have that bonding or that, be together like that, then I can imagine that would be really challenging.
Yeah, because they were talking about I'm thinking about like the difference between even when children are in the nursery versus rooming in. I remember when my daughter was born, they gave me the option because they talked about the importance of bonding with children as soon as possible, at birth. So as I look at a few more things here, I want to go through a few more things here. As we were going through, we were thinking about, oh well, they have women locked up. They're shackling. We're working now with SB 393 to try to get that law in place to help ensure that women have all access to things that they need. Right. So the now what here piece is, so now what is everybody is that there are some organizations out there that do great work, and one of them tonight is Esther of the Fox Valley, and that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to showcase this discussion, because not only is Esther working with women who are shackled, but let me just tell you a little bit about it, and Kayla can tell other things that she may want to share about women being shackled, some things going forward that we might need help with to help get the law passed or what have you. But Esther of the Fox Valley, it stands for Empowerment, Solidarity, Truth, Hope, Equity, Reform. Esther is an interfaith social justice organization, a grassroots nonprofit organization focusing their work in the Fox Valley region of Wisconsin, which is northeast Wisconsin. So for those of you, it's about 30 miles south of Green Bay, all the way down maybe to about 50 miles before you get into, maybe 60 miles before you get to Milwaukee, because I believe that Oshkosh is probably 38 miles,
Mm-hmm.
give you that 60-mile marker. What the purpose of Esther is to bring together people of faith and communities of faith to build community and identify and act on the issues of injustice. It is an injustice to shackle a pregnant woman. I still haven't heard anything that tells me that person is a threat in the environment. I still don't know what the threat is to that person, to themselves, the environment, or to the child. Because those are the only reasons that I could see shackling. And as far as that, thinking about that, I can see why you would want to shackle somebody in those cases, but what has been your experience, or what is some of the feedback that maybe you've gotten back, as any other additional information you've gotten about why they do this to women in the prison system?
Um, I haven't really found like other reasons like so far, like why it's being done. Um,
Okay.
the main reason just being again, they're worried that, if a woman is in medical care and she's not being shackled, that she might pose like violence towards like the medical staff or the corrections officers who are present, or that she might try an escape attempt. And
You
I know,
hear
and
me laughing
I
here,
know, and
right?
it sounds crazy because, if there's a woman who is giving birth, it's like, I mean, again, like I just want to go back to the fact that prisons were designed by men for men. So men were not thinking about, if there's a pregnant woman who's in labor and trying to escape, like they're not thinking about how a woman's body works. If a woman is in labor, I mean, that would be very challenging to escape. I mean, there are a lot of medical complications that would go along with that. Um, and if you're in the process of giving birth, like you're not going to get very far. Um, I know. So it sounds a little bit crazy when it comes to that rationale, because again, like there could be so many complications that would come along with that. And in one of the articles that I read that talked about this topic, there have been like a few cases where some women have like tried to make like escape attempts while in medical care, but they were either found within a few hours or they just turned themselves back in.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like you're not going to get very far. You have so much extra weight attached to your body, and there's so much added like physical and mental stress that comes along with that, and all of the medical complications that could come along with it. And, a woman is going to need additional medical care, hence why she might turn herself back in.
Yeah, because the odds of her getting very far, because we know what we know about women's bodies, so the odds of her getting very far are going to be slim to none, is what I would see.
Mhm.
So we're going to move to just a couple more things here because we know that everybody really wants to know all about Esther and the great work they're doing. We know that they're an interfaith social justice organization. They also work with congregations and individuals in collaboration with community partners and public officials so that everyone can have a voice and a role in bringing about strong and just communities. What a mission, right? Esther sometimes, sorry about that, everybody. That's the way that technology works. Sometimes it just does its own thing. Esther sometimes seeks to mobilize support for or opposition to legislation or rulemaking. We do not, however, advocate for candidates or parties. So we want to make that perfectly clear here that Esther is not advocating for a specific party line or anything like that. What we're looking for is the justice aspect, how we can equitably apply justice, looking at the diverse groups, and then how can we make sure that we include people at the table that need to be at the table to have these discussions. I think I got that right. Did I get it right, Kayla?
Yes, definitely.
So there's a few more things that we just want to talk about right here, everybody. Sorry about that. My technology is going the way that it wants to go. It just killed my presentation, but that's okay because I'm still here. There are a couple of organizations out there that do some great work in the community. In addition to Esther, there is also People of Progression, whom we partner with also, and I know that People of Progression is also really affiliated and interested in social justice issues in the community, particularly when it comes to what's happening with some of our children in the school system here in Appleton, and we'll see that. Kayla, what do you think that people can do right now to really show their support for women in shackles, and how can we make our voices heard? Because I think that that's what people really want to do. We know that there's a call for compassionate empathy, and that means that we have to do something. We want to take action.
Mhm.
Talk to us about what we can do.
I think that one thing that everybody can do is speaking, with your representatives, with your legislators, and, whether that's by physically stopping into their office or something like just calling them, just giving them a call, leaving them a voicemail. And that just lets them know that this is something people care about. Because if people don't make their voices heard on topics like this that matter, it might not get voted on, or it might not be something that's brought to the table. So that's why it's really important to, speak with your representatives on issues like this. Just today, I was actually in Madison with ex-incarcerated people organizing. They had their Empathy Day of Action at the Capitol today. And, one of the issues that we were talking to representatives about was like unlock the vote. So incarcerated people having the right to vote, that kind of thing. So with this topic in particular, with the shackling of pregnant women, women in labor, this is a really important issue that we could talk to our representatives about. And I think that, they would be interested in hearing about it. This might be something that, not everybody has full knowledge on.
Mm-hmm.
And the more people that get educated on this kind of topic, more people are going to feel empowered to, I guess, use their voice and to talk about this kind of stuff. Because, yeah, for me particularly, when I learned about this issue, because I'm really passionate about like prison reform and things like that. And with this particular issue and how it affects incarcerated women, particularly, like I'm feeling more empowered to, speak with representatives or to just like start conversations with people out in the community about this. Because just having those conversations with, like talking to your friends or your family is something that's so important. Because again, just that education component of it, getting people educated on this kind of stuff. So then more people just feel empowered to start those conversations, and then more people become aware of it, and then it words turn into action, and then action is how we can affect these people who are incarcerated and get them the justice and equity that they deserve.
Yeah, you bring up a really good piece about and being a communications person. I know you'll understand this, is that the only way we can even regulate or really understand anything is we have to be aware of it first, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
first piece is that's one of the goals and the mission and the purpose of Voices Randomish and us having this conversation is if you're not aware of what's going on out there, you would not be able to do anything. And then the fact is that even if I am aware, I may not know what avenues I can take to be supportive. So thank you for pointing out a couple of things, which I'm actually going to recap. Like Kayla said, unlock the vote. Use your voice, use your vote, because that's the purpose of having the ability to vote. If we have people who are locked up that can't, be that voice for them and say, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
use my vote so that when someone has served their time, paid their debt to society, that they're allowed to vote, right? Because who knows, if you might be in that situation, pay it forward, karma kind of thing. People would be empowered to use their voices when they know that there are ways that they can support people in the community. The conversation that you talked about, having that conversation with family and friends, and for those people out there that may be watching now, that you're duty bound to have the conversation with someone else, because to Kayla's point, if I know something that's not right, then it behooves me to try to make the world better by having that conversation. And one of the things that I have on my LinkedIn profile is that I'm changing cultures one conversation at a time. And so just like this is what we're doing, we're engaging in this dialogue so that we enlighten other people who might be inspired to go out and uplift someone else. And that's the whole purpose of doing this. We talked about speaking with legislators, calling and leaving them a voicemail. I know that people are like, leave a voicemail. Well, yeah, because the more voices and the more different voices that they hear, then the more likely there's to be some movement on it. There are a couple of other things I think I had in this PowerPoint that I just want to share with everybody tonight, because we said, okay, so now what? All right, well, we talked about Esther, so let's talk about a few other places or other entities here in the Fox Valley that are helping us to make known what's happening, right? All right, so let's do this. Let's share this. Let's grab this PowerPoint right here and put it back up. So we said, now what? Well, there's also People of Progression. People of Progression, along with Esther, they partner in the community to carry out things to help make the community a better place for us all to live here in the Fox cities. And since Appleton, Nina Menashe, and Oshkosh are the Fox cities, we're one big family. And so if the vision of People of Progression is to intentionally build supports around marginalized African Americans in our community, focusing on a holistic approach, healing, skill building, and targeting the root causes of systemic oppression. This is another root cause of systemic oppression, because when someone is incarcerated and the majority of their rights are taken away, then we have to be those voices where we actively speak out for them. We empower those families and the next generation. Those are the things that we can do. So here in our communities, we have to use our voices. Yes, we're going to need SB 393. There are benefits for it. Esther can only do so much, and so can People of Progression. The question is now that you know that this is going on, what will you do? Because there's a call to action. So for all those people out there listening, are you registered to vote? Are you aware of the different legislative or policies or procedures that are taking place, or changes that are happening in your community? And I'm going to say this. I've been doing some stories late last year and some early this year, and some things are really starting to disturb me around the arm of women's rights. The voting issue with the ban in Texas, right? the whole thing about Roe versus Wade with taking away some rights. People, if you don't see that there's a connection between your being distracted on eyelashes, hair, and nails, and people taking away our reproductive rights, our voting rights, you
Mm-hmm.
missing something because it's in your face. This is just another way, like Kayla said, to exert power over the body. And your voice, your interaction, your involvement in your community, being that voice for the voiceless, we have a responsibility to speak up and speak out for those who can't. Especially for, there's another whole piece that we didn't even get a chance to talk about right now. And that's those children that are impacted. So what happens? What happens to those children? Is anybody talking about what's happening to the children while they're not able to bond with the mother? You know that they say that the first couple of months of life is imperative for the child because many children will suffer from sudden infant death syndrome and or failure to thrive if for some reason they don't properly bond with the mother. So what are some other things that you think that we might could do immediately? What's one thing that you might do today, tonight? I know there's one thing that I'm gonna do.
Um, I mean, again, just like having those conversations, I think is really important. Doing like further research. I know I already learned a lot from some of the articles that I already read. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, definitely further research. That's definitely something I'm going to um, keep doing. Talking with people in Esther about it. I think that's something that's really important. Just, when we had that conversation in our last mental health task force meeting, we had a really good open conversation about it. So I think just having that open dialogue again with in our different meetings, I think will be really important.
Because yeah, because my question is that like they have a child. What happens to the child after those children are born in the prison system? What happens to them? Are they taken somewhere, or what do they do with the children immediately after the birth of the child?
That part, I'm not sure on. I didn't see that in, the areas that I researched and the different articles. So that's something that
Okay.
I would be really interested in learning about. Because if
Yeah.
that child is taken away somewhere, after, the woman gave birth, it's like, yeah, what is going to happen with that child if they're not having that bonding experience? And
Exactly.
how is that child going to grow up? I mean, do they grow up in the prison system, or like, do they grow up in like a foster system? Because something really, I guess, interesting that I kind of wanted to talk about was how, like, something I researched was how, like, the war on drugs, it kind of reshaped what makes a bad versus a good mother, by kind of criminalizing certain actions like, drug and alcohol intake during pregnancy. And so women are being criminalized for that. And, if a child is taken away after, a woman gave birth, maybe if she was, had alcohol or drug intake, if that's why she ended up being incarcerated, then that child, maybe they end up in the foster system and, kind of restarts that cycle again. If we don't try to do rehabilitation efforts or education, things like that, we just kind of, keep having this prison cycle in place.
Recidivism is what you're talking
Hmm.
about.
Yeah, definitely.
The crazy thing about this is because when we look at this, society doesn't realize, or maybe they do realize, and that's part of the power structure, the power dynamic about the control of the money and the votes and where money goes,
Hmm.
because you're paying for it in numerous systems. If we're not supporting, I think the thing that I'm getting here is if we're not supporting these supporting incarcerated women by treating them humanely, because what we're talking about is a humanitarian issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a political issue to me. This isn't about this is totally what's right and wrong for somebody in that particular situation, and a health perspective and a
Mm-hmm.
full health perspective. Their physical, mental, emotional, psychological, all that social stuff that's going on. You talk about them couching it in the war on drugs. You're right about that again. It's couching it in that euphemism. You know, every time you talk about a war on drug, when we know that we're talking about certain bodies, right? Because again, when you look at the structure of power and the patriarchy that we live in this society, then you know that it's white men at the top making the laws and everybody else getting stepped on. That's just
Mm-hmm.
really the truth of it. The truth of the matter is that that's what really happens, is that you have at this point right now people like the governor in Texas, you know, people out in the Supreme Court that don't have female bodies making decisions about
Mm-hmm.
what happens to female bodies when
Exactly.
female bodies go through unique situations, and criminalizing certain things that only apply to women's bodies. And what
Mm-hmm.
I mean by that is when you're talking about the criminalization of drugs during an alcohol intake during pregnancy, that's only confined to a woman's body, because the man is off the hook, as we can see. But what
Mm-hmm.
about the man being penalized for possibly the stuff that he's putting in his body before and when he connects with the woman? So when you find whatever is in the body, doesn't necessarily mean that it was all about the woman. No, it could have been her partner that has something in his system, because whatever's in his system is going in your system and into that child. So when we talk about criminalization and the war on drugs, again, it goes right back to what you said. It's putting women in their place, and because literally those are conversations that happen in other rooms that we don't hear about, putting us in our place. And if you think about the word hysterectomy in controlling the seat of what women are, anybody that studied anything about gender and the body understand what I'm talking about. That all these laws were centered around women's reproductive organs and women's reproductive rights as a mean to control us financially. Because if you mess me up through my reproductive organs, I may not be able to be fit to work. I might have to take off more time. I'm already seen as somebody who is not as valuable as a man because I have different reproductive parts that could possibly cause emotional issues, and I might hit a button somewhere. Thus the reason why we can't have a female president. I call bullshit on it, but that's what they do. I'm,
Well,
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
you
I'm
hit
just
the
taking it there.
no, you hit the head on all of that. That was, yeah, that's amazing. I mean,
So
it's all just another method to control women's bodies. I mean, and it's just, it's so scary, everything
well, we sitting
that we're
around
seeing
figuring
right
out which
now.
which which wig to wear, which eyelashes to put on. How does my butt look in the mirror? You know, all of those things. Those are all distractions, and I really am going to say that because I want women to understand. You getting bamboozled. You getting the okie doke dropped on you. You're gonna wake up one morning, and we're not gonna have the right over our own body, let alone, and we're gonna feel just like those women that are shackled. They're physically shackled, but aren't these laws a certain kind of a subversive way that's
Hmm.
shackling us? I invite anybody out there to challenge us on this. Challenge us and tell us that those changes in those voting laws, challenge us and tell us that those laws that are happening in the prison system to shackle and control women, tell us that these other things that aren't happening in the workplace, to have women exiting the workplace in the name of primary care and child care, all things around women's bodies, and we're distracted by hair, nails, and eyelashes, y'all. I'm serious.
Mm-hmm.
Women are more worried about having their waist snatched to size or looking like a Kim Kardashian clone than they are about understanding that their votes are being taken away, that their rights are being taken away. We're going to wake up one morning and we're going to be back in 1941. And
Yeah.
we know that a lot of stuff happened in 1941, and we're seeing remnants of stuff like that happening now. So, how far are we from that if what we're seeing, on one hand, are inhumane non-humanitarian things that are happening on a much larger scale, you guess what? This stuff gets pushed way down under the radar. And nobody hears about it because of what's happening in Ukraine, right? So now this goes under the umbrella. But we're not going to let that go so far down in the sand that we can't dig it up again. That's the purpose of this discussion tonight, to let y'all know we can't get distracted by what's happening over in other countries. We need to focus on what's happening here in the U.S. and what's happening to the bodies of women and women's right here in the U.S. We need to use our voices now, everybody, because you're going to wake up one morning and you're going to be wondering what the hell happened if you don't try to make something happen now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be wrapping up shortly here on Voices Randomish. Like we said, we hope you tuned in tonight to just listen to our discussion about what's happening to women who are in labor and incarcerated. I still don't have an answer to what's in the environment that's threatening to the environment, the child, or the staff at the prisons to warrant or necessitating a woman being shackled while she's in labor. Because I can tell you, I don't know any women in labor other than, like I said, could you just give me an epidural?
Mm-hmm.
It shows you how little men know about women's bodies.
Yep, they're the ones making decisions about them.
Make a decision about whether you can have an epidural too. Y'all think about that one.
Makes a lot of sense.
Well, we're going to probably do a part 2 to this show because I really want to hear from our indigenous community. I also want to hear from the Latinx community, and I'm hoping that Felicia will be able to join us next time to talk about the research that she's done in her occupational work that she's done. I don't want to give away her thunder or share anything. Let her tell that when she comes back. Kayla, I want to thank you for being available tonight, and so I wouldn't have to pivot and talk about the other story that I was going to talk about, which I probably am going to go back live in a few minutes and just kind of share my thoughts on all things Oscar.
All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And Kayla, can you tell people again how they can reach out? What are some of the services, real quick, before we wrap up? We know that Esther is interfaith, but tell us what are some of the other services that Esther offers and how people can reach out.
Yeah. So some of the issues that Esther focuses on, environmental justice, transportation equity, mental health, prison reform. And so these different topics, like we all have, like these are all different committees. So if people are interested in any one of those specific committees, we can go to our Facebook, our Instagram, our website, just look up Esther V.O.I.C.E.S Valley. And there will be a page like where you can, read about these different committees if there's something you're interested in. We have monthly meetings for each one of these committees where we talk about different things that are happening right now. Like, for example, I'm also involved with our environmental justice committee. And during our meetings, we've been talking about March 4th to Earth Day, which is a series of rallies we're holding around climate change, environmental justice, that kind of thing. So they're being held every Friday until Earth Day in Houdini Plaza, starting at, I think, 5 p.m. it starts at. So yeah, these are just peaceful rallies. People go there, they've got posters and stuff, just to kind of rally around environmental justice and stopping Line 5. That's would be proposed to go through, Upper Michigan, Wisconsin, and cutting back into Canada.
Is that the Line 5? Is that the rail?
This Line 5 would be going underground. So the proposed line, they have it going underneath the Great Lakes, which poses an enormous environmental threat. Because if that pipeline were to break, if it were to leak, which many pipelines do, and if that leaks into the Great Lakes, which supplies so much of our fresh water,
be gone.
I mean, that would be disastrous. And especially This pipeline is so close to indigenous communities that live up there. And this pipeline was originally going to go through indigenous land, and that was vetoed. And so now they're trying to cut around it, but the pipeline is still going to be, if it broke, it would be going into their drinking water, their water supply. And so their communities are very affected by this, and it would just be devastating if this pipeline were to go through. And so that's something that our task force is really trying to push back against. And we're really working with our fellow indigenous communities, indigenous partners that are, because they're the ones who are really like on the front lines of the environmental justice movements, are indigenous people. And so we really want to lift up their voices and, get guidance from them in terms of, where do we go from here? How do we best go about this? They're the ones who have the blueprints to protecting the environment, caring for the land. They're the original stewards of this land. They still are the stewards of this land. And so that's why it's, so important to uplift their voices. So yeah, that's why these protests or these rallies that Esther is, taking part in is really important. Again, it goes through Earth Day. So if anybody is interested in participating in those, we have those events on our social media. It's on our website, so you can get some more details about that. But yeah, Esther is a really great organization to get involved in. I'm super happy and super proud to be involved with them. So many incredible people are with that organization. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be with them and that I was able to be here tonight. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Kayla. And I like that plug for Earth Day and the ESG and environmental service, because we could have a whole discussion, I know, on environmental service, particularly how there's a lot of public housing that does not have air conditioning built in it when they build it. You tell me why Texas, Arizona, places like that would build public housing and not have air conditioning. Those are other things that we can talk about. I'm so excited though. The ESG work, that everybody needs to be looking at the environment. Thank you for telling us about what's happening with Line 5, because as we hear, that might be another discussion that we have to come back and talk about it, because and especially with our indigenous people. But I think that anybody that doesn't understand that drinking water might be impacted, yeah, that might be another whole conversation. Well, thank you again for tuning in tonight here to Voices Randomish with me and Kayla Nessman from Esther's of the Fox Valley. I will make sure that the link is in the video description. When I upload the video, it'll be on YouTube. It's already live out on YouTube, but I'll add the link for Esther and People of Progression, so that if you're so inclined to lend your hand and your heart and your head to helping, give a hand. We appreciate you. Like, subscribe, share Voices Randomish with all your friends and family, and we will see you soon on our next broadcast. Thank you.